welcome everybody to this week's edition of the Critics Corner. I'm Andrew Branca with the Waxahachie Sun.
And I'm David Dunn with Southlake Style Magazine. Sorry to cut you off there, bud.
No worries. No worries. So this week's movie is definitely a favorite of mine because I picked it. It's the 1992 movie Malcolm X, starring one of my favorite actors, Denzel Washington. And
yes, sir.
I really think this was a role that really defined him as just a major player in Hollywood.
Oh, big time. And I was surprised to find out, initially, I went back and looked through the timeline. I was like, where does this movie place as far as Denzel Washington's filmography goes? Was surprised to find out this was after the 86 film Glory, where
89.
Denzel Washington 89. Thank you. Sorry, I flipped it upside down. That he won his first Oscar in that movie. He came back to work with Spike Lee, and I believe their second collaboration on Malcolm X. And I gotta say, Andy, this was one I was really looking forward to. I hadn't seen Malcolm X when I was younger. You threw a bunch of suggestions at my plate. Thought this would be a great time to witness the story of Malcolm X. And I gotta say, man, Denzel Washington is spectacular in this movie. Wherever you feel on the spectrum as far as Malcolm X, his politics, and how his life impacted Black America at large,
and his religious beliefs,
Yeah, that too. But wherever you stand on that, Denzel Washington portrays him immaculately, emotionally, intelligently. This is one of the few movies where I would say Denzel Washington was almost transformative in the role. Like he melded perfectly into it.
I don't know if it won an Oscar for it, but if it didn't win an Oscar, it was definitely a crime. I mean, Spike Lee did a great job telling X's story. I mean, and then Denzel was you didn't see Denzel Washington on screen, you saw Malcolm X. And
exactly. I love that. Go ahead.
It was fantastic. So it's a favorite of mine.
Yeah, and I definitely concur with that. You definitely sense Spike Lee's style in here. I'm an intermittent fan of his. I really enjoy Do the Right Thing. Love BlacKkKlansman. Other movies such as his, including She Hate Me, Chirac, and Miracle at St. Anna's, I don't think resonated as much with audiences. But this is really Spike Lee at top form. It definitely has his style as far as the production design, the costumes, capturing the era of the story they're telling. He does a really immaculate job telling X's story with style and pizzazz.
Well, and Spike is also in the movie.
Yeah, he is. He's one of Malcolm's buddies early on in the movie, and they have great chemistry with each other. I forgot how much I love Spike Lee as an actor. Like, he's just so charismatic. He's a character of his own. It shines beautifully on the screen. On your note on the Oscars, I did look this up before starting this. Malcolm X was nominated for 2 Oscars, one of which was Best Actor for Washington. It didn't win either of them. And honestly, I don't know what's more of an outrage. The fact that Spike Lee was robbed of nominations for Do the Right Thing, or if he was robbed of nominations for Malcolm X. They're both kind of ridiculous.
I mean, I've seen some biopic movies that have been done. One of my favorites is Val Kilmer's portrayal of Jim Morrison, which is, wow, that's really incredible. This is one of my favorites because it's so immersive. It makes you feel like you're there with him, but maybe not a part of it, but a witness to history almost.
It definitely feels like it's turning a page in the history book for sure. And one thing I wanted to echo off of that, I was amazed at how much I'm personally different from Malcolm X, right? Obviously skin color, Black separatist. I don't agree with that ideology. He's Muslim, I'm Christian. so you have all these differences lined up, but it's not about what a movie shows. It's about how it shows it. I was very surprised at how emotionally moved I was by his spiritual journey in this movie. I mean, early on, Malcolm is basically this common criminal, right? He's this young black man perpetrated by the American system, and to survive, he kind of falls into this really harmful cycle of crime, drugs, women, all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And then only when he's punished for his crimes, only when he is thrown in prison, albeit harshly, he really kind of finds salvation in the peace, in the knowledge, and in the wisdom of Allah. This movie makes a lot of biblical references as far as the transformation of Paul, the fallibility of David, the wisdom of Solomon. It makes a lot of these Christian references, I think, because it's speaking mostly to a Christian audience, but it relates to Malcolm in such a personal way that you're like, oh, I get this completely. There's a scene in the movie where Elijah Muhammad, the prophet, appears to Malcolm X in jail, and he describes it in comparison to Paul's revelation. And I was completely moved, man. I was surprised at how much this movie absorbed me into its material.
Well, definitely. I kind of felt the same way almost. Well, a little bit different, but I did kind of feel the same way about how this movie affects you. I mean, Malcolm X is definitely a controversial figure in American history. And I remember growing up in school, public school, you talked about Martin Luther King. Malcolm X was really a footnote at the end of the textbook, and it made them to seem like they were buddies that worked together. And that was not really the case. I mean, he expressed a lot of, in a way, kind of some pretty harsh opinions that were very controversial, that people disagreed on highly, and let him know about that. But what I think is interesting in this movie, you see his transformation, where he kind of finds the light, so to speak, in jail, but it even goes more beyond that to where he kind of looks at himself again and sees and takes inventory of what he's been doing, and changes and starts working with the civil rights movement. He's still controversial, but it's more about Black nationalism, so to speak. And but I just thought that was kind of interesting how they show that change in him, and how he was affected by the people around him.
Exactly, and that was another thing I admired about this movie, is how many transformations he goes through. And again, like you said, the movie does not shy away at all from what he was. He was a controversial figure in the time where he was active. I mean, and he's just as much a controversial figure today.
I mean, he called for the separation of race.
Yeah, exactly. Like so the movie does not shy away from that truth. But what I'm so mesmerized by is seeing his opinions, seeing Denzel's, very acute delivery, his, very direct, announced pronunciation, and you still get where he's coming from. You disagree with him fundamentally, but emotionally you understand what's going on.
Yeah.
Another scene I love in this movie that kind of shows the transformation this characters go through is whenever he goes to the city of Mecca, and he kind of, revisits, the truth behind his faith. And he even, in the movie, he even kind of dictates that, hey, I was wrong to say that, the black man should be separate from the white man, because he bonded with all sorts of people when he was in Mecca. And
I think he referred to them as his white brothers.
Yeah, his white brothers, yeah. And I love that. I love that he found unity in Allah. He found peace. He found resolution in other things, other temporary things that did not fulfill him throughout his life. I just think this movie is so profoundly personal, and how it just tells his story is just beautiful, man.
Well, it just makes me wonder if he wasn't assassinated, what he could have done with that new outlook he had on life.
Exactly,
Which is truly the tragedy of all.
And I concur with that. I watched this. I'm like, man, what legacy would he had today if that would have been carried out a little longer, right? Well, what if he was remembered more in his late life than he was in his midlife? Like, I not that he doesn't already have a phenomenal legacy. This movie does also paint the impact of his life and how it has affected Black America, and there's also a real profound truth in that as well. But man, oh man, this movie just, it makes you think. It makes you think about the history of America. It makes you think about Black Americans' place in it. Makes you think about the points that Malcolm X is very validly raising. And it just kind of makes you wonder, who's the bigger villains? Is it, well, I don't want to say villains, but who's the bigger aggressors? Is it Malcolm X? Is it Black nationalists? Or is it maybe the white Americans that have perpetrated this racial hate for several years? It kind of throws that in viewers' plates without providing a very clear answer.
All valid points, I think. So.
Yeah, and one other point I do want to raise about his assassination. You see Breaking Bad, right?
I have.
Did you notice Gus?
No, I didn't. I didn't notice him in Malcolm X.
Gus was in Malcolm X, dude. He was one of the black guys that attacked him in the end sequence.
I didn't notice that. Well, did you catch the other cameo in the movie?
There were several cameos, but if you're referring to the last one, yeah, Nelson Mandela.
No, I'm referring to, you know, the scene where they march to the hospital to check on their brother that's been beaten up by the police. You know who the police captain is that he talks to?
I don't recall. No.
Peter Boyle. Everybody loves Raymond.
Oh my God.
Frank Barone. Yeah.
Oh wow. I did not catch that. I definitely need to rewatch it now to go through that again. Yeah. Oh my God. That was another thing that was really cool about this movie, is seeing, you know, because there is a lot of cameos in here. I missed a lot of them, but just those few that I noticed, I was like, oh man, it's really cool that, you know, Spike Lee sneaked those in there. Yeah. I will ask you this, and we discussed earlier how much of a crime it was that Do the Right Thing, that Spike Lee wasn't nominated for either Do the Right Thing or Malcolm X. Still blows my mind. He won an Oscar finally 2 years ago for BlacKkKlansman. Do you feel like he deserved the Oscar most for that movie, or do you feel like he should have been recognized much sooner?
I think he should have been recognized much sooner.
Yeah, I concur with that. It blows my mind that he just has gotten so snubbed so many times.
Well, and the other thing, if you look at Spike's movies, I mean, you can see how much he's matured as a filmmaker.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think he's definitely finessed his craft for sure. I love BlacKkKlansman, one of my favorite films of 2018, but what is it, like 20 years later? Really? It's like, it's why I don't take much stock in the Oscars, man.
Well, isn't Denzel's son the lead in BlacKkKlansman?
He is the lead. He is. John David Washington is the lead in BlacKkKlansman. I was like, hey, man, you know, Spike's got some history with the Washingtons. That's kind of cool.
Well, so 1 out of 10, what do you give Malcolm X?
Solid 9. One other point I did forget to raise: the movie is 3 hours and 15 minutes long. For the most part, it doesn't feel 3 hours long. It does drag a little bit in the third act, but still flows very nicely, and it still closes out with an emotionally satisfying conclusion.
I'd give it a 9.
Yeah, I think it's fair.
And that's, like you said, that's probably more for the length than anything else. A 3-hour movie is a 3-hour movie, and that's hard to watch sometimes. Not saying it's not bad or anything, but
Yeah, I am. Go ahead.
But yeah, that's all I was gonna say. It's just it can be
Yeah,
rough on your tuchus there.
rough on your tuchus. I'm stealing that phrase. Um, if you had to cut a part of this movie, what would you cut? Because I was thinking about this. I think I would cut like some of the scenes where he's I don't know, where he's there's a part of this movie where there's a lot of phone calls, where people are calling his house and threatening his family and all that. I feel like you could have cut in some of those scenes, retain the point, and move more quickly through the plot.
Well,
That's what I would have cut.
I also thought it was interesting how Malcolm's life and his father's life really parallel in kind of a way.
Yeah, I thought that was very moving how they mirrored that as well, that parallel.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's gonna do it for this week's of the Critics Corner. If you have any questions, comments, shoot me an email at andrew@waxahachiesun.com or
David at southlakestyle.com.
okay, well that will do it for us this week, and we'll see you on the couch.
See you on the couch, folks.